Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Monroe Carmen. I'm president of the Press Club and editor-at-large at Bloomberg Business News. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as those of you watching on C-SPAN or listening to this program on National Public Radio or the Global Internet Computer Network. Before introducing our head table, I would like to remind our members of some upcoming speakers. Tomorrow, June 8th, film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert will mark the 20th anniversary of their television show with their view of the state of the movie industry. And speaking of movies, on Friday, June 16th, actress Sharon Stone, who will be in town for the annual National Race for the Cure, will talk about wellness, fitness, and a positive attitude. And on Thursday, June 22nd, Robert Wright, the president of NBC, will discuss television in the changing society. Transcripts and audio and video tapes of Press Club luncheons are available by calling 1-800-NPC-2334. That's a new number, 1-800-NPC-2334. Thank you. If you have any questions for our speakers, please write them on the cards provided at your table. Pass them up to me, and I will ask as many as time permits. And now I'd like to introduce our head table and ask them to stand briefly when their names are called. From your right, Cynthia Ramsey of the American Petroleum Institute. Llewellyn King, publisher, King Publishing Group. Maria Riccio, Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Donald Blinken, the U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Hungary. Richard Whittle of the Dallas Morning News. Mr. Bakros, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Hungary, has not been able to arrive yet, but we hope he still will join us during the program. Skipping over our speaker, Mark Johnson, Media General News Service and Chairman of the NPC Speakers Committee. Georgi Banlaki, Ambassador of the Republic of Hungary. Bill Hickman, a member of the National Press Club Speakers Committee, who arranged today's luncheon. Thank you, Bill. Nancy Dunn of the Financial Times. Martin Chase, Kiplinger Washington editors, and Douglas Harbrecht of Business Week magazine. Our speaker today is a most intriguing individual. He is a former communist. He helped to put down the uprising by Hungarian freedom fighters against Soviet rule in 1956. He is a socialist and heads the Socialist Party in this country. On the surface, these appear to be an improbable set of credentials for the man that Hungarians have chosen to lead them in the new political landscape of Europe that sees the rough and tumble economics of the free market as the avenue to prosperity. Yet, take a close look at what Gyula Horn has been doing since he became Prime Minister of his country last July. In March, his government announced an austerity program designed to reduce the annual budget deficit and the public debt. He's proposed cuts in government spending, including spending for welfare. He's letting energy prices rise to market levels, and he's seeking to privatize as many state-run companies and industries as he can. Prime Minister Horn also encourages as much foreign investment in his country as he can, which is a principal reason for his visit to the United States this week. Indeed, Mr. Horn fits in well with today's Washington. Given his recent program, he might even qualify as a Republican. To emphasize the capitalist nature of his visit, Mr. Horn is accompanied by Finance Minister Lajos Bakros and Central Bank President George Soranyi. They are regarded as the dream team, the intellectual brain trust behind the new financial program. Hungary indeed holds particular appeal for foreign investors. It has attracted almost 50% of all foreign investment in the Central European region since democracies there began to cast off the Soviet yoke some 6 years ago. And most of that foreign investment has come from the United States. Mr. Horn has also expressed his interest in having his country join both NATO and the European Union. Hungary, a landlocked nation of 10 million people, also is very much affected by the current Balkan crisis. That war that is devastating Bosnia could spill over into other countries in the area, including Hungary, despite the best efforts of Europeans to isolate the battle. Perhaps Mr. Horn will give us his views on the appropriate American role in Bosnia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the National Press Club podium the Prime Minister of Hungary, Gyula Horn.
Elnök úr, hölgyeim és uraim! Köszönöm szépen ezt az ismertetést. Ez igaz.
And that is true.
Még ha az igazság a szélesebb és teljesebb is.
Even though the truth is wider and broader based. I agree that I could quite easily become a Republican.
Nos, 3,5 napja tartózkodunk az Egyesült Államokban.
We have been in the United States of America for 3 days and a half.
És ez a 3,5
These 3 days and a half,
amelynek jó részét
most part of which
vezetőivel töltöttük el.
we have spent with the leaders of your country,
Számomra rendkívül tanulságos.
to me has been most informative.
Miért?
Why, you may ask me?
Mindenek előtt azért,
Primarily because
mert önöknek olyan elnökük van,
you have got a president in your country,
Clinton elnök úr,
President Clinton.
olyan adminisztrációk van,
You have got an administration, you have got a government,
és olyan kongresszusok,
and you have got a Congress
amelyek érdemben foglalkoznak
which
közép-kelet-európai
deal
régióval.
in merit with the East Central European region.
Abban az értelemben,
In the sense
hogy konkrét cselekvést folytatnak,
that you do concrete actions
az ottani változások megerősítése,
to strengthen the changes
az
there
átalakulási folyamat nagyon nehéz feladatainak a megvalósításába való.
to materialize and support and assist the process of transformation in the region.
Ez nem mindig volt jellemző minden
This has
amerikai kormány.
not been a characteristic feature of all American administrations, and we very much appreciate this. I can say that on the experience of yesterday and on earlier days' experience. It is well known that US now
Az egyetlen globális hatalom
is
a
the
világon.
only global power in the world,
Óriási lehetőségei,
with huge potentials, opportunities,
gazdasági, politikai vagy
be
katonai.
it economic, political or military.
Én azt hiszem, hogy az amerikai
I think that the American leadership
felismerte,
recognized
hogy ez a globális szerep
that this global role
kihívást is jelent.
presents a major challenge
Egyfajta morális kötelezettség.
and also a kind of moral obligation
Különböző térségében zajló folyamatokért.
for the various ongoing processes in the various parts of the world. I must also add,
Vagy ez nem csak nagy kötelezettség,
this is not only an obligation,
lehetőség.
but this is also an opportunity for the US
Nagyságánál, erejénél fogva.
because of its size and strength to fulfill these obligations.
Miért hangsúlyozom ezt?
Why do I emphasize this?
Mert úgy ítélem meg,
Because in my judgment that the East Central European region,
Lengyelországig,
from Russia to Poland and from Poland down to Bulgaria,
ennek a régiónak
this region In this region, the key duty, the key challenge is how we shall manage to implement transformation. This region that has a lot of unstable elements should be able to succeed the process of stabilization. Largely depends on the stability of the European continent. And European stability is a decisive element of the stability of the world. As far as we are concerned, Mr. President, it is true, many of the present leaders in the East Central European region were former communists, including myself. I would also like to add right away that at the same time, these communists, these are the reform communists that launched reforms both in Hungary and elsewhere in the region. They did out of their own will and energy course of democracy, freedom, and did the transition. In 1988, bills were adopted in Hungary about the freedom of enterprise, about the freedom of political and economic freedom enterprise, at the time when the Warsaw Pact still existed. And the Comic-Con also existed. The reform, due to the reform powers in Hungary, the people knew also in the past, and even more so now, they knew what market economy it was and is. We have got a tradition of 20 years at least in Hungary, and I would also like to add, to me, in that region, in our region, one of the greatest, greatly respected persons is Mikhail Gorbachev, who when he came to office and following that in 1985, made an immense step and act that no one else in the region, perhaps no one in the world, had the courage to do, and that was he gave up the earlier Soviet policy and practice, which imposed the Soviet system, the Stalinist system, on the Allied countries. Gorbachev created possibilities of a free change of system for the countries of East Central Europe. For him, as a reformer, he has got a historic merit that those changes started and has reached the phase where they are now. Hundreds and thousands could be enumerated who have done a lot over the past period in the recent years for the sake of this transformation. Whatever has been created in the world, whatever has created the new situation in the relationship of world politics, these all can be due to mutual efforts, which on the one hand the activity of our own internal reform forces, on the other also the support of the Western democracies. I would like to emphasize that the political transformation takes place more easily and during a shorter period of time than the economic social transformation. The political transformation means at the moment in the East Central European region that the states, including Hungary, very clearly committed for multi-party system, parliamentarism, state ruled by law, and the implementation of human rights. The power structure, the elements of power structures have been established, including the government. I am convinced that without any exception in all the countries, what went on in these countries is irreversible. I would also like to add something. From the point of view of Hungary, this is why it is important. Since centuries, this is the first time we are now in the situation in the second half of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s that we were free to decide about the construction of a social system that we chose for ourselves. Just in the same way as we freely decided whether we want to join a alliance. No power dictates that on us because it comes from our own recognition, from our conviction. I want to underline this to make it clear that our accession to the NATO and the further role of the NATO in Europe does not mean primarily that the NATO wants to expand, wants to enlarge. But it means that the number of new countries apply now for membership in the NATO. One of these countries is Hungary. These countries, and I'm talking about on behalf of Hungary now, comply with the conditions and requirements of NATO membership. I wish to underline this because this is how NATO should approach the question, and it is hardly doubtful that the alliance does not have any ground to refuse our claim for membership in the alliance. As far as the economic social transformation is concerned, I would like to bring it to your kind attention that we are following an unbeaten track. Because actually what we are having now, we started to build and we continue to build market economy. A market economy that is being built from the top down, that is managed from the top down to the bottom. You will kindly remember in Western Europe, in the West, it started from the grassroots level and the private enterprise came into being and created what now exists in Western Europe, in the Western world. It is taking place in the reverse order in Hungary. Let me just mention one example in this relation. A privatization of a scale that you can see in Hungary. Neither in the world nor in the history has been exemplified yet. Practically, a complete, total, centralized state asset. We shall go to the dominance of private ownership. It is the Hungarian government is determined that before the end of 1997 this dominance will be created, which in practice means that the share of the private sector in the GDP will reach about 75 up to about 80%. And without exception, practically every strategic branch, energy sector and others will be part of the privatization process. I would also like to stress this fact. This is important and this gives also great opportunity to American investors to participate in this process of privatization. It is extremely important also to bear in mind that this privatization, tens and hundreds of jobs are thousands and hundreds of thousands of jobs are eliminated. Since 1992, 1,200,000 jobs were eliminated in Hungary. You know in the United States what jobs mean, what a challenge it is to any government, in a similar fashion to our government too. It is vitally important for us to create new jobs, because outdated plants and factories have to be eliminated. At the same time, new modern companies have to be created, and we need financial resources. In connection with this, we have got discussions, disputes with the European Union. European Union says you can join us if you fulfill the conditions. These are very concrete and very strict conditions, not in general terms. How much the deficit of the budget, the deficit of the current account can be. The conditions are justifiable, but it is also obvious that these conditions alone of our own strength are not able to fulfill. The West, without the contribution and cooperation of the West, we cannot do it, because there are no free financial resources available in the region, and not in Hungary either. I would also like to add one thing. It is out of the question that this is not about egoist interest in the process of the transformation, a kind of unilateral aid also. I would like to underscore, because there are misunderstandings around this. We are not talking about that billions of money are put into the region in the form of support and aid. I know there are charitable support, there are charitable organizations. This is also very important. But what we offer and what happens in practice is none other than business. Because in Hungary and in other countries of the region, it is, the market is extremely absorbent. I would also like to add, this is not a third world region, East Central Europe, because qualified, skilled labor is available. Alone in the Central European, not to count Ukraine, and 120 million skilled labor, qualified labor is available. At the same time, as far as wages and salaries are concerned, they are extremely low. Very serious advantages, conditions are available for the potential investors. What we say that we want cooperation with the West in an asymmetric way in economy and financial affairs. Asymmetric when the countries that have capital appear in the region, invest, and they will get back the profit, and if it is necessary also their invested capital. This is a mutually beneficial business economic cooperation. The political importance of which is also very important, because this is how we can mitigate and ease the huge social tensions coming from losing the jobs and coming from other conditions and factors. Because it was also characteristic of previous years, the old regime, which in my opinion, which had two decisive negative features. One is the regime was anti-democratic. The other was against achievements and performance. Did not perform. Perform not in line with the expectations of the society and the economy. Well, in connection with this latter one, I would like to stress that performance, achievement, we need techniques and technology developments which indeed will not leave the region in a backward state. We also have to do away with the practice that a number of countries during the previous regime, performance and the social care was financed from foreign loans. This cannot be maintained any longer. We all recognize it, and we determined to take further reform steps, which brings in line the expenses with the actual achievements of the economy. This is again Hungary that first recognized it. I hope they will recognize this also in other countries, the necessity of this in other countries as well. And finally, let me say one more. Naturally, for our region, for Hungary, it is of key issue security. Security, which in many ways over the past years has not become stronger. However, I would even say that has shaken. No one thought that after a few decades, after ending the Second World War, the most senseless war will break out in Bosnia. Because this is a senseless, meaningless war, during my discussions in Washington DC, we devoted a lot of attention to this issue too. Hungary, which is especially in a sensitive situation, because Serbia and Croatia are neighboring countries. Hundreds of thousands of Hungarians live there. To us, we have to follow a very clear and determined policy. We handle it. Our approach to this question is that there should not stop the diplomatic political efforts. At the same time, the community of nations have to make more determined steps in other areas to have a hope to end the war. I would like to underscore that this security and this security challenge at the same time also means that East Central Europe will be destined for failure if against each other, if they want to ensure their own security against the interest of others. We never ever needed so much than nowadays that the states of East Central Europe should try to materialize, implement the policy of historic reconciliation. There have been various bad feelings in the region. The Hungarians have got in connection with the neighbors, so do the neighbors in connection with us. We can't help about this. The present generation, the present policy cannot help. Our opinion is, if we just look back into the past and licking the old wounds, we shall not have energy to solve the present problems. We have got to look to the future. We have got to reconcile with the neighbors. We have got to make symbolic steps, and we have got to prove that we are not cross with each other, because I'm convinced we have to demonstrate towards the developed countries that we are not killing each other, but we are annihilating and eliminating our problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. You spent years as a diplomat in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia. How do you view the war there? Are the UN and the United States following the correct policies? And will American troops be required?
Igen, 6 évet töltöttem Jugoszláviában, mint diplomat.
Yes, indeed, as a diplomat I spent 6 years in Yugoslavia.
Egy rendkívül kedves ország.
It's an extremely nice country.
Hadd mondjam el, hogy
May I tell you that, in my opinion, basically there are two keys. There are two key issues in connection with the Yugoslav crisis now.
Az egyik,
One is
hogy Szerbia,
that Serbia,
kis Jugoszlávia,
or smaller Yugoslavia, and the government headed by Milosevic, what is his relationship
a boszniai helyzetet, a boszniai
to the Bosnian situation and to the struggles and fights led by the Bosnian Serbs? It is my conviction
Szerbiának is érdeke,
that it is in the interest of Serbia, that it is their vital interest
teljes mértékben elszigetelje az agresszorokat.
to completely isolate the aggressors.
Nemzetközi közösségnek legfontosabb feladata,
The most important duty, one of the most important duties of the international community would be
hogy erről meggyőzze
to convince of this
a szerb vezetést.
the Serbian leadership.
Garancia arra,
It can also be a guarantee
időn belül megszűnik háború, vagy befejeződik háború.
that the war will come to an end within the foreseeable future. The other,
Az ENSZ helyesen járt el,
the United Nations was correct, and I think
hogy minden katonai
every
vállalkozás
military
lehet fogadni abban az esetben,
enterprise or act is acceptable in the case
határozaton nyugszik.
if it is based on the resolution of the United Nations, because
Nemzeti
United Nations is democratic
éve hozza meg a döntést.
and brings in a democratic fashion on behalf of the nations of United Nations.
Ugyanakkor azt is figyelembe
At the same time, we also have to consider that the possibilities of the UN are rather limited.
nincsenek olyan eszközeim.
They don't have the means and instruments like the NATO does.
És bárki is
Whoever criticizes those recent steps taken,
azoknak a figyelmébe
I
ajánlom,
would like to bring it to the kind attention of those.
lépésre kerülhet még sor a
The
háború
further
érdekében.
steps could be taken in order to end the war
Se lehet ma biztosan állítani, hogy célra vezet.
that right now we cannot safely say that will take us to the good end. The situation is very special there, and there are all sorts of means and ways, and they have to be tested before we find the most adequate one.
And the question of sending U.S. troops to Bosnia. Yes or no or maybe?
Nem, talán.
Én nem akarok beavatkozni az amerikai belpolitikába.
I do not want to interfere into the internal policy of the United States.
Then a question about the arms embargo. Should it be lifted so the Bosnian Muslims can defend themselves?
Meg kell szüntetni. Hogy a boszniai szervek képesek voltak.
Én nem értek egyet semmiféle felfüggesztéssel vagy megszüntetéssel mindaddig.
I do not agree with any suspension or lifting before we have got evidence
Hogy hajlandók a nemzetek közösségének a döntéseit érvényesíteni.
willing to implement and enforce the decisions of the community of nations.
Is there a Hungarian minority in the territory of the former Yugoslavia?
Magyar kisebbsége volt Jugoszlávia területén.
How large is it and where is it?
Mekkora is hol van?
And what is its status in the current conflict?
A jelenlegi konfliktusban a helyzet.
Van összesen
Yes, there is
000 magyar él a volt
about
Jugoszlávia
600,000 living on the former Yugoslavia,
Vajdaságban.
most of them living in Vojvodina in Serbia, also in Croatia and in Slovenia.
Most meg szeretném mondani, hogy a világ.
I would like to tell you that everywhere in the world the situation is, if there is a conflict somewhere, it is always the minorities who have to bear the greatest sacrifice. Now the situation, the plight of the Hungarians, the war aggravates their situation furthermore. Masses of young Hungarians were conscripted And it is not by chance. And in our bilateral Serbian-Hungarian relations, we did raise the issue with them. There are problems also in the field of ensuring their rights, primarily in Serbia. If the situation eases, we are ready to conduct normal dialogue and normal relations with Serbia.
How worried are you that the fighting in Bosnia will spread to Hungary and other Central European countries?
No, there is no reality, thank God.
How is your relationship with Boris Yeltsin? Can he survive politically?
Ezt majd tőle tessenek megkérdezni.
Well, I would like to ask you to ask him personally.
Are extremist political groups such as ultra-nationalists forming in Hungary as they are in other former East Bloc countries?
Vannak.
There are in a small number extremist groups. There are in small number. But the good news is they are not represented in the Hungarian parliament. They participated in the election campaign last spring, but neither group managed to get even one seat in the parliament. The Hungarian people are wise enough to reject and to refuse these extremists, and does not ensure any political background to them.
Turning to your privatization program, is there resentment building within your country over selling state-run enterprises to foreign investors?
There are disputes, for instance, in connection with the electricity board, electricity company, and the supply of electricity. There have been various trade union positions that this should not be given to foreign hands. I would like to add that, for instance, in France, also French partners tell that the electricity, they want to keep it in 100% state property. Our opinion is that the whole electricity industry needs reconstruction, the power stations, the network and others, that all these, without the involvement of foreign capital, cannot be modernized. This is the reason why we need to involve foreign capital, and in my judgment, the majority, overwhelming majority of the society approves of it.
Can you tell us why your government stopped the sale of Hungar hotels to U.S. investors, and what kind of a message does that send?
Thank you very much for putting this question. First, there was a misunderstanding in the press in connection with this question, because in connection with the Hungar hotels, the owner did not assume any obligation to sign a contract. The government intervened not at a time when there was a valid contract. The second thing I would like to say, the investigation that had to be done and that had been started by me personally, the justification for that was that there was a grounded suspicion that law was violated when the tender was issued and when the tenders were evaluated. So the law was violated and the investigation justified that it so the laws were violated that were in effect. And let me just add a third important element, that practically out of this privatization, which meant selling 15 hotels, we could hardly derive any revenue. That is the Republic of Hungary. And actually we are not talking about slums or huts or very poor hotels. World standard hotels were among them on the River Danube, hotels that were built, financed partly or fully from the foreign loans that we are now repaying. So we are paying for that, we Hungarians, the costs of building these hotels. This is why it is not all the same to us. When privatized, to have a realistic price, not some outdated old building. I would also tell you, finally, that it was obvious that there were contradictory and there were loopholes in legislation on privatization. This is why the new government submitted a new bill on privatization, which was adopted on the 9th of May. And this makes it absolutely clear which are the cases when there is a need or there is no need for central interference. What we want, and this enable the legislation gives, we want that the government should not, that there should not be a need to interfere unless there is a violation of the law.
Is your country having more success at privatizing and creating a free market than Russia has had? And if so, why?
I must tell you honestly, I have never ever in my life received a question like this. Because the two countries cannot be compared. How do they privatize in Russia? I was quite recently paying a visit to the southern part of Russia. They privatized a company that employed 38,000 people, which means that they turned the company into a shareholding company. Every employee, the 38,000 employees received their own shares, and with this they declared the privatization process completed. How they managed to produce $1 of profit, and they were not able to tell me that, how they are going to modernize that company, because they could not answer that question to me. This is one thing this is a difference between Hungarian and Russian privatization. The other thing, that in Russia, they do not know what market economy is. Now they are trying to learn something about that. In Russia, market economy was something that the kolkhoz market. Somebody went to the market and bought 4 potatoes or tomatoes. That was market economy in Hungary. We have market economy for the past 20 years. And the institutions of market economy have been gradually established. Do I need to tell you any more details? I think we could sit together until next afternoon.
Did you voluntarily embrace your current austerity program and appeal for foreign investment as an economic model, or was it foisted on you by the International Monetary Fund and the Western governments?
Both. To be quite honest, both reasons. Partly, it was our own recognition, the essence of which is we cannot spend more than we have enough money to spend.
Gondolom a családok is így élnek
I
Amerikában.
think this is how families live in America.
Annyit költenek,
They can spend as
amennyit
much
keres a férj meg a feleség.
as much the wife and the husband earn.
Ezt teszi, és eladósodik, annál
If they
rosszabb neki.
don't do that, if we've got debts, that's going to be a bad situation. So this is how, if we spend more, we shall have
Annak a
debts,
kamatai mind nagyobbak,
and the interest rates are becoming higher and higher, and we shall be in the red.
folyamat ment végbe.
So that was the process going on, and we recognize that process. On the other hand, the Western countries and the international financial institutions demanded that we should change. So actually the two met, own recognition and the demands of the banks and the financial institutions. Let me also add, a government must also be good-hearted.
De nem lehet egy kormány sem jótékonysági intézmény.
But no government can be a charitable organization or institution.
Nemzetközi pénzintézetek sem.
Just like the international financial organizations are not charitable humanitarian organizations. They demand what the partners should do.
Has the United States government done enough to encourage new industries, especially high-tech industries, to invest and develop in Eastern Europe?
Eleget tett,
Has done enough,
és eleget kell, hogy tegyen.
and they must do, that has to continue, because we have still a lot ahead of us in East Central Europe. I would also like to add, naturally,
Ebben sokkal kisebb szerepe van egy kormánynak, mint a nagy cégek.
the role of the government is much smaller than the role of the big companies on both sides. In Hungary, in your country, that the government has got to make certain conditions more favorable.
Így például mi számunkra
For us, for instance, it is necessary
egy fontos intézményes elemnek,
to preserve certain institutional elements, to maintain GSP, to support our accession to the OECD. This is what the governments can do. And naturally, they can also do
alapokat hoznak létre,
that they set up certain funds and recapitalize in the auspices of government guarantees. But these are not of decisive importance. What is decisive, that the big companies, what they do.
Két dolgot szeretnénk hangsúlyozni.
I would like to emphasize two
Nem
things.
csupán arról van szó, hogy az
We are not only talking that
befektetők
the
első helyen állnak Magyarországon
the-
befektetés volumenét.
as far as the volume of investment is concerned, the American investors take the first place.
És ha én amerikai lennék,
If I were an American,
nagyon vigyáznék arra, hogy ezt az első helyet meg,
I would be very careful to preserve this first place.
hanem az is,
But it is also
hogy az amerikai cégek
that the American companies
sokat hajtanak végre,
make investments
sok munkahelyet teremtenek,
which create a lot of jobs,
és ez rendkívül fontos.
and this is extremely important, as I mentioned earlier. Secondly,
Tényleg a
that indeed
technika,
techniques,
fejlett technika is
high-tech technology, the newest developments of the high technology are brought in the country,
pedig a
not the
jó néhány évvel ezelőtt.
ones going back to many years ago, the ones are discarded.
Olyan cégeket,
I can
General Electric,
enumerate companies like General Electric, IBM, Ford, etc.
Thank you. Now, can you give us some idea of when you hope to join the European Union and NATO? Do you have a timetable in mind? And secondly, what do you see as the purpose of an expanded NATO?
Ami az első kérdést illeti,
As far as the first question is concerned,
2000, december 24-én délelőtt 10 óra.
at 10 o'clock in the morning on the 24th of December, the year 2000,
Karácsonyi ajándék.
as a Christmas gift.
Készek vagyunk
We are
és aláírni a megállapodást.
ready to sign the agreement with the European Union on our accession.
Úgyhogy ha akkor találkozunk,
If we meet then,
látjuk, hogy
we can justify,
bevált ez a jóslat.
we can see whether this prediction has come true.
Mi kell ehhez?
As far as we are concerned, we shall do our utmost to comply with the conditions. Now it's up to the European Union. The relations are progressing well. The Visegrad Group and the associated countries are present there in every important there in the structural institutions of the EU. As far as the expansion of the NATO is concerned, I'm convinced that it is not only Hungary or other acceding countries will have a benefit, but it is also good for the NATO. It's a great spiritual, physical capacity that we bring in if we are members in the NATO. Our knowledge, know-how, experience of the region, of the world, whether it will further expand the opportunities for a greater role in Europe. I'm convinced if NATO takes it serious, that they have to assume responsibility for the international or European processes. They cannot close the doors to accept new applicant countries.
Last question. Thank you. Yes. Before we get to the last question, a few gifts, a certificate of appreciation for being with us today, a National Press Club mug, which will enable you to either drink coffee or solicit funds for investment in your country.
Thank you very much.
And finally, some of the most famous photographs of our presidents taken by American photographer George Thames. Last question. The questioner says that the freedom of the press rating of your country has fallen in recent times. What can you say about why the freedom of the press has fallen, and what is the future for more freedom opportunities for the press?
I know it is difficult to believe what I'm going to say. It is not only governments that can make a mistake, but also a newspaper can also make a mistake, or a journalist can make a mistake. I know. I always said, don't they get cross with journalists, because I will be on the losing side. So politicians get into controversy with them, and I think I always manage to do so. I am sorry that Freedom House is not fully aware about, and they're kindly invited to talk in Hungary. Let me tell you two things. One is that this government was the one that during 11 months put an end to 2 papers, actually 3, which have to do with the government and financed by the government. And I would like to emphasize there is no daily paper now which would not criticize very strictly the government. It is not like this in the US. Everybody praises the president and the administration, but in Hungary we have not yet reached this stage. As far as broadcast media is concerned, we have inherited that we have to subsidize them from the budget, the television and the radio.
És a parlament válassza meg a két
the parliament elects
rádió és a televízió elnökét, vagy nevezi.
And appoints the presidents of the radio television. The media bill is in front of the parliament already. It's up to the parliament now when they adopt it. We hope, and it is our intention, it is expressed also in the bill, will be completely independent of the government. That's the rate. And if this bill is adopted, which will be independent of the budget, then we are going to organize a feast that evening.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Prime Minister. The Prime Minister asks that you remain in your seats until he and the delegation have left. They have an appointment at the Treasury at 2 o'clock and must leave immediately, so please sit still for a little while. We were very honored. Country. On the surface, these appear to be an improbable set of credentials for the man that Hungarians have chosen to lead them in the new political landscape of Europe that sees the rough and tumble economics of the free market as the avenue to prosperity. Yet, take a close look at what Gyula Horn has been doing since he became Prime Minister of his country last July. In March, his government announced an austerity program designed to reduce the annual budget deficit and the public debt. He's proposed cuts in government spending, including spending for welfare. He's letting energy prices rise to market levels, and he's seeking to privatize as many state-run companies and industries as he can. Prime Minister Horn also encourages as much foreign investment in his country as he can, which is a principal reason for his visit to the United States this week. Indeed, Mr. Horn fits in well with today's Washington. Given his recent program, he might even qualify as a Republican. To emphasize the capitalist nature of his visit, Mr. Horn is accompanied by Finance Minister Lajos Bakros and Central Bank President George Soranyi. They are regarded Good afternoon and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Monroe Carmen. I'm president of the Press Club and editor-at-large at Bloomberg Business News. I'd like to welcome club members and their guests in the audience today, as well as those of you watching on C-SPAN or listening to this program on National Public Radio or the Global Internet Computer Network. Before introducing our head table, I would like to remind our members of some upcoming speakers. Tomorrow, June 8th, film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert will mark the 20th anniversary of their television show with their view of the state of the movie industry. And speaking of movies, on Friday, June 16th, actress Sharon Stone, who will be in town for the annual National Race for the Cure, will talk about wellness, fitness, and a positive attitude. And on Thursday, June 22nd, Robert Wright, the president of NBC, will discuss television in the changing society. Transcripts and audio and video tapes of Press Club Luncheons are available by calling 1-800-NPC-2334. That's a new number, 1-800-NPC-2334. Thank you. If you have any questions for our speakers, please write them on the card as the Dream Team, the intellectual brain trust behind the new financial program. Hungary indeed holds particular appeal for foreign investors. It has attracted almost 50% of all foreign investment in the Central European region since democracies there began to cast off the Soviet yoke some 6 years ago. And most of that foreign investment has come from the United States. Mr. Horn has also expressed his interest in having his country join both NATO and the European Union. Hungary, a landlocked nation of 10 million people, also is very much affected by the current Balkan crisis. That war that is devastating Bosnia could spill over into other countries in the area, including Hungary. despite the best efforts of Europeans to isolate the battle. Perhaps Mr. Horn will give us his views on the appropriate American role in Bosnia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the National Press Club podium the Prime Minister of Hungary, Gyula Horn.
Elnök úr, hölgyeim és uraim! Köszönöm szépen ezt az ismertetést. Ez igaz.
And that is true.
Még ha az igazság a szélesebb és teljesebb is.
Even though the truth is wider and broader based. I agree that I could quite easily become a Republican.
Nos, 3,5 napja tartózkodunk az Egyesült
We have been in the United States of America for 3 days and a half.
És ez a 3,5
These 3 days and a half,
amelynek jó részét
most part of which
országának vezetőivel töltöttük el.
we have spent with the leaders of your country,
Számomra rendkívül tanulságos.
to me has been most informative.
Miért?
Why, you may ask me?
Mindenek előtt azért,
Primarily because
mert önöknek olyan elnökük van,
you have got a president in your country,
Clinton elnök úr,
President Clinton.
olyan adminisztrációk van,
You have got an administration, you have got a government,
és olyan kongresszusok,
and you have got a Congress
amelyek érdemben foglalkoznak
which
közép-kelet-európai
deal
régióval.
in merit with the East Central European region.
Abban az értelemben,
In the sense
hogy konkrét cselekvést folytatnak,
that you do concrete actions
az ottani változások megerősítése,
to strengthen the changes
az
there
átalakulási folyamat nagyon nehéz feladatainak megvalósításába való.
to materialize and support and assist the process of transformation in the region.
Ez nem mindig volt jellemző minden
This has
amerikai kormány.
not been a characteristic feature of all American administrations, and we very much appreciate this. I can say that on the experience of yesterday and on earlier days' experience. It is well known.
Cards provided at your table. Pass them up to me and I will ask as many as time permits. And now I'd like to introduce our head table and ask them to stand briefly when their names are called. From your right, Cynthia Ramsey of the American Petroleum Institute. Llewellyn King, publisher, King Publishing Group. Maria Riccio, Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Donald Blinken, the U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Hungary. Richard Whittle of the Dallas Morning News. Mr. Bakros, the Minister of Finance of the Republic of Hungary, has not been able to arrive yet, but we hope he still will join us during the program. Skipping over our speaker, Mark Johnson, Media General News Service and Chairman of the NPC Speakers Committee. Georgi Banlaki, Ambassador of the Republic of Hungary. Bill Hickman, a member of the National Press Club Speakers Committee who arranged today's luncheon. Thank you, Bill. Nancy Dunn of the Financial Times. Martin Chase, Kiplinger Washington editors, and Douglas Harbrecht of Business Week magazine. Our speaker today is a most intriguing individual. He is a former communist. He helped to put down the uprising by Hungarian freedom fighters against Soviet rule in 1956. He is a socialist and heads the Socialist Party in his